It's time to talk about NIO and NIO stock. And I'll warn you, this is going to be a long video. In fact, I've got over 40 tabs queued up for this video. So I'm hoping I can do it in one fell swoop, a very long take. But what I'll do to make the video more convenient for you to navigate in case you don't have time or don't want to watch all the way through to the end is I will create chapters or timestamps, and you can click, look at the bottom of the screen and find those, or you can click more and then look in the description to go to and select the topic or topics that you want to check out. I will also share all of the reference points from this video that I'm going to share and walk through and talk through with you. So buckle in. I think it's going to be a fun one. Hopefully I can get through it all. Let's start with the NIO stock price in the short term. And there are three short-term stock price indicators that I've kept at the bottom of the screen in a lot of my videos here over the last year or so. And these are indicators that I use because they make it easier for me to see and to track kind of what my expectations are in the short term with respect to the stock price action. So if we start with the first one, that is trade volume. And the most recent trade day that we have data from was Friday, February 20th, 2026. This is the number that of shares that was traded during the day of NIO stock, under 35 million shares. Now, that is a pretty low number for NIO. And historically, when we've seen NIO stock make big moves, aggressive moves to the upside, it's come on bigger volume. Bigger, by my definition, as being 100 million share trade volume or more during the day. And I've actually got most of this year to date here showing. Actually, this is, year to date showing on screen. And there has only been one day in this year of 2026 where we've seen NIO stock trade over 100 million shares. And it was a day when we saw the most recent move that has actually been maintained pretty well. So that's why I kind of remain bullish here in the short term. Now, the short term or near term, I should say, time frame that's the most compelling for me, and I've been thinking this for a while, but in case you haven't, been to the channel or heard me talk about it, it's March and April of this year, and we'll talk about why in a little bit and throughout this video probably. But because I want to stay focused and on task with the three short-term stock price indicators, I think I made the point that we've had very low volume here early in the year in 2026, and yet just on one day of 100 million share trade volume, we did see there was a news announcement and then a nice move up that has basically been maintained since then, even with low volume. So that's the main point I want to make about the trade volume here in the short term. And that's why I'll be watching it moving forward, especially heading into March. Now, the second stock price indicator in the short term that I like to use is FTDs. And the FTDs, these are when there could have been naked shorting going on. There could have been manipulation of the stock price. And I've got the full history of NIO stock as it's traded in the US on screen right now. And we've basically had three different time frames. If I'm looking at this and just kind of breaking it, apart, this early part here, this piece right here, we had the white lines, very elevated, spiking FTDs. So could have been manipulation going on, suppression of the stock price. And with that, you saw the price was pretty low. Now, what changed, and this is where we tie in with my 100 million share trade volume, kind of that point, is there was about a 6-month period where NIO stock went from $3.50 to over $55. Now, that came with two things happening. As you see, the FTDs drop off during this second kind of window or time frame. And at the same time, during that 6-month window where NIO stock made that big move, it traded 100 million shares on 75 days within that 6-month period. So again, sort of validating this idea that's largely remained true and held true of big volume seems to see NIO stock move up. Now, there's an important time frame that happened in here where I've called them the suspicious short Citadel. They got involved, and maybe they were before, but I became aware of them and their involvement and taking a short or put position in NIO. And that was when it was somewhere in this time frame. I remember NIO was trading over $40 when I did the video and said, hey, heads up, we've got a suspicious short, that's gotten involved, and I want to keep an eye on this moving forward. Now, there are also some things that happened, some ETPs over in Europe and that were created, and some, levered shorting and things that could have been utilized outside of the US market. And then also, you see the reemergence of, or the reappearance followed by the eventual spiking elevated FTDs. So at that same time, volume, um, started to come down, price comes down, and FTDs spike and go up. Now, again, you can kind of tell I'm just looking at this as three pieces to the story: one, two, and three. Now, what does the fourth one look like, and when does that happen? That's what I'm really curious about, and whether or not maybe March and April will actually, represent a new or the fourth sort of window, the next phase. Um, I think the easiest thing to track is going to be the trade volume on the daily side of things in the near term. The FTDs are delayed, lagged data, so we never get to track them real time. I'm always, sharing and talking about it when we see them and get them, but the idea that there are millions, I'm sorry, I should come back and make that point. There are millions. I mean, this is a 1 million level right here. So even with year to date, one and only one day of 100 million share trade volume for NIO, so very low volume, and yet there are millions and millions of shares that couldn't be located or delivered. So, again, this just makes it even more compelling and I think bullish for what NIO is doing, maintaining this level on such low volume. And if we continue to see the elevated FTDs, things get really interesting, especially if NIO ends up having some bigger volume come back. So this is a sentiment gauge, and it is a simple indicator and a very simple one. I don't even check it that often, to be frank with you, but it is kind of interesting when you look at the NIO Reddit mentions, and this is the 1,000 level, and really that hasn't even happened since back when NIO made its huge meteoric move. What's interesting about this is I think it's possible, and I've shared this before. I think it's possible that some of the market makers slash those with short or put positions that are perhaps wanting to control stock price action and do a lot of different things and can do a lot of different things to do that. I think that it's possible that NIO made this move and even since then has been grouped in with meme stocks. And if these meme stocks are being shorted together, let's say in a basket, let's say a company like Citadel wants to short a bunch of them all at the same time, then they may, just view and short them all together. Also, I think NIO could be getting shorted in a Chinese basket. And in fact, I did a video in 2025. I'm going to do a follow-up video in 2026, but it'll be later this year because I want to share in that video whatever the updated data is. But Citadel is one, not the only one, but one of the companies that had a shorter put position in both NIO and Alibaba. And I thought that was kind of curious or fascinating. And so again, I want to check and see if they don't end up going long at some point this year. But that's also why I want to wait and do that video at a future date. I want to give more time to all of this playing out. And more on Citadel a little bit later, because there's something really interesting that kind of may tie in. Maybe it's not relevant, but I want to offer it later on. So let's pivot now a little bit and talk about why this March timeframe has been on my radar as so compelling. And this was the announcement from NIO. Now, this February 5th date, of course, aligns beautifully with the move and the only day that NIO in the US market has traded over 100 million shares. And it was off of that move from basically the close, I think the day before was $4.44. And NIO has maintained, and even now it closed above, this most recent Friday, February 20th, it closed above $5. So even with a lot of noise and a lot of negative sentiment and things that have gone on over the last few years, this profitability, which by the way, NIO, I think is going to announce in March, is part of why I was looking ahead to that. And then there's more in April. But we'll come back to that in just a second, because I think that it's worth pulling this up again so that you can actually put eyes on this. This is when that news announcement came. And again, it's the only trade deal with 100 million share trade volume. And yet even the low since then has brought it nowhere near where it was prior to that. So again, this all seems to be aligning very nicely in my mind, even in the short term. But I also want to now talk about why the Trump and Xi visit in April is so interesting. And so I want to offer sort of all this stuff together, but because I couldn't effectively break everything down, here's what I've done. I have queued up 5 different videos that other people have. And just today, now, by the way, I'm recording this on Saturday. It's February 21st, 2026. My goal is to get this video recorded and then hopefully slightly edited and then uploaded, and I'll release it Sunday, February 22nd. That's my hope, my goal. And so the convenient thing for you all is not only have I created all these timestamps for this video by the time I release it, but also I spent a little bit of time, several hours actually, just going through these videos and giving you timestamps. So when I share the link for each of these videos, you will be able to just go to the comment section. It will be recent that I have made this post, so it should be pretty easy to find. And I actually give you the timestamps. Now you can watch this all the way through and learn why the rare earths and the supply chain in this instance, and I'll just say this, I've mentioned this before, this is the first time I'm actually sharing this much of the research, and it's other people's research that I've dug and found. So that's why I'm creating these, so you can go and you don't have to watch the hours and hours of content that I have. You could just go and check these main points out. But rare earths are essentially the advantage. They are the leverage play that China has over the US. And that is why I think that April timeframe with the visit between Trump and Xi is so interesting. And I don't know if Wall Street is up on this or not. I don't know if they're going to go long Chinese stocks. Maybe they're already starting to. But what I did do and could do is exactly this: share these data points from these different videos, and then I mention what they are. Now, in this one, how long you watch from, let's say this one, is up to you. But then this, I mean, I'm just connecting dots, sharing the research, and if you take, 10 minutes probably in each of these videos, you'll learn something. I promise you. And this is exactly the kind of research that I'm happy to share, but it takes so much more of my time than you can understand, which is why I did want to take the time and do a long video. But in this case, just a couple points, and they're both later on in this video. And then here's the other thing. This is an article share. Now, Luke Groman, shout out to him for sharing it. And this is a pretty deep dive. I know, because I went through the thing in its entirety, and it is lengthy. And I think a relevant point is this. This is a big shift or change that happened. And it's also something that, because of the legality and the way that the court systems work, certainly in the United States, we have a much longer road ahead, and we will not be able to get rare earths quickly, I don't think. Not at the level that China has already developed. And the reason that we need them so much is for our military. And so if we actually are reliant on China because of their ability to get us the rare earths that we need, so that we could, let's say, if we ended up in a war, actually be in a war for a longer period of time with any major country, I just think there's heavy irony in all of this. And I'm not going to go all the way through, but you get the point. It's a deep dive. So coming back to this, as I continue to share, so I queued up the first 3 interviews with Luke Gromen, and then that was a post that he, had pointed out, and so I checked it out. And now we're talking about Louis Gave, and if I could, I'm going to try to reach out to Natalie Brunell, I think is her name, because I would absolutely love to have her get both of the guys on at the same time and interview them together. I think a lot could be learned if we could hear from both Luke Gromen and Louis. Louis is French. He's been doing business in Hong Kong for a long time. But even when he's speaking, he talks about we, us, as in being in and from the West. And so his view, not only is he in China, so he's seen a lot of these things, but this is the way he breaks things down is, wow, it's incredible. So you've got more of the, China USA dots here. This is the second share now of Louis Gave. And again, he's just and really there was a pivot point that happened back in 2018. And since then, I think that certainly we in the United States largely are completely unaware of what's happened. And unfortunately, this military reliance that we have on China now has been, and Luke Gromen talked about it, it's been shared and talked about for many years. And I think, I got to make this point because I think that one of the biggest issues that we have here in the US is these political cycles. These folks who want to get reelected and maintain power, they can only think in terms of 2 years to 4 years because those are the election cycles. And so they're so short term with their view and trying to just maintain their status that, to me, it's just not shocking that a long-term, viewed country like China that is still an emerging market, frankly, but that is an enormous one and has incredible, capital and potential, has actually surpassed us in more ways than probably we have yet realized. So I hope we get our act together, but I don't have high confidence just because of our political division, the toxicity, the erosion of the US dollar, and the fact that we have these 2 to 4 year political cycles, and that seems to drive so much. And it's so much inefficiency and waste, in my opinion, just from the majority of my life that, I've lived here in the US, born and raised. So, by the way, this is George Chen, and he authored this. And this was written February 17th or published February 17th. Very interesting. Some good, I thought, interesting points. And if you kind of read between the lines, I think you'll see, or at least recognize, especially once you have gotten through, if you take the time, the little bit of time, comparatively speaking, to get through those things that I shared and listen and just kind of think about things and then recognize that there is a big shift that's taking place. And I think that my hope is the positive that comes out of this is a win-win is what both China and the USA want. But I think that actually could result in some things that none of us have really expected. More on that a little later. Actually, never mind. Boy, I set myself up for that, didn't I? This is the next thing I had queued up. And once again, I think there is a shift taking place. I did share this article because this is one of the few that caught and talked about, at least from research right after it happened, just recently. This is in Detroit. Here, he talked about having China come to the USA, and with respect to the auto industry, and it was just not talked about by folks here in the US. I was digging, trying to find it. So anyway, I wanted to share that as well. And again, all of this just aligns with I don't know, it's nuts to me that more people aren't paying attention or realizing that we could have some major shifts here, even in the short term. But I did want to do this. And let me see if I can get this to the right page. Here we go. I did want to talk about this because there's been a shift, a change with the tariffs now based on the Supreme Court ruling. And let's say there's a 10% tariff. All right, let's talk about and do a comparison for if NIO decides to bring Firefly to the USA and let's say they just export and they don't even come over but they just send some over. Now there is an unknown, and it's not just for the US, it's for a lot of different countries where they don't have power swap stations. But if you can buy Firefly with battery as a service optionality, this was just a limited edition, but the price point range here with battery as a service for Firefly is between around 11 and 14,000 US dollars. Now they've got a low interest thing that they're offering for 7 years financing. And basically I ran the numbers on it, and this would put a monthly payment of a brand new Firefly at less than 200 US dollars a month. Now, compared to that, I was curious. So I looked at Tesla's website, and I also ran the numbers for the cheapest new Tesla that I could buy. And I would have to put down more money. And the payment would also be more than twice what I would be paying for Firefly. And that's even if you factor in and calculate a 10% tariff. So where before I wasn't thinking or expecting or even, counting on NIO entering the US, I think this could happen a lot sooner than people realize. And maybe even we get an announcement, a surprise, from the meeting between Trump and Xi here in the next couple months. So again, a very compelling time to track things. The reason I wanted to share this is Firefly is the key to the global expansion for NIO, and they know it. They even have it on their link it's firefly.world. So there's an indicator for you, a little teaser that they gave us for anybody paying attention. And then this, I wanted to point this out because this is an article by, I think it's CNEV Home, and they show the rankings. And this is a couple things actually from this that I wanted to share. After peaking in December, Firefly's January sales cooled to 2,737, so 2,737 units. And where is it? Here it is. So this is then talking about the low rate, down payment, 7-year low interest financing plan. But I also wanted to point out and kind of remind that, and they mention it here, for overseas markets, right-hand drive Firefly models have begun shipments and deliveries. And then they talk about wanting to expand to 40 countries and regions. Now, this means they're sending some out, which I think is an indicator of why these numbers dropped so much from December. Also, if you want a validation on it, this is January 8th. And I remember in a video I shared that NIO had already started deliverings in Singapore in 2026, which means they sent some in either December or January. And so anyway, this is, I think, an ongoing thing. And it's frankly, the price point with battery as a service, I don't think anybody can compete with that for the level of product that you get. It's incredible. So moving on to the next point. And I want to briefly mention, the unknown, I think, is the power swap infrastructure, which we're going to drill down on this because there's a profit point and an energy play that I think should not be ignored, that can go way beyond China for NIO with the power swap stations. But there is an unknown. It really comes back to the the irregularity and all the regulations involved in going to different areas. And we saw NIO experience this when they tried to expand in Europe. In some places, the reality of the rules and regulations, especially, let's take the United States as an example. We have city codes and ordinances. We have county rules or codes, ordinances, whatever you want to call them, laws. You've got state stuff, you've got federal stuff. There are layers of, and by the way, some of them are completely hypocritical of the others. So it's a layer of, I mean, you've got to dredge to get through it all. And so that could slow in different areas that aren't open or have more regulations and hurdles to get over. That could slow the power swap portion. And of course, then what does that do for battery as a service? Is it's still something you can get where you don't have to buy the battery, and you can still charge either way. But I don't know what that looks like yet, but it's something to think about. And that's time to move kind of in line with that, but the battery asset company, and I want to point this out because they're referenced a few different ways. Marathon is one way that they're referenced. The battery asset company is another way that they're referenced. And another is the Wuhan Winning battery asset company. So these are all the same thing, but they're just referenced as that. Now this is the, I've pulled up the annual filing. This is the most recent one, and it was filed in April of 2025. I'm looking forward to the new one, and there's some stuff I'm hoping to dig out of that. But this is where we basically go back to, there was a point in time in 2020 where William Lee said, and I remember I didn't really understand what it meant at the time, but it was important. I could tell that. He said, we achieved, how did he say it? Upgradeable, swappable battery technology. And so this is basically you've got battery as a service, but then you've got, within the battery as a service model, one of the earliest partners was CATL. And CATL is a monster in the battery space. And they, having been involved with NIO from, this early stage of development and seeing NIO building out the power swap stations and being involved, as a partner in the battery asset company. And by the way, I think they both are at about 20% interest, at least as of this most recent filing. So, they're sharing some of these costs and profits, whenever they get to that point. But CATL obviously has inside information, having been partnered with NIO. So seeing them come out, and initially, I think they had a plan and tried to do their own thing, and that didn't go as well as they maybe thought it could. So then they made a little shift, a little pivot, and this is still an ongoing thing, but this is kind of a validation. And the government, Chinese government is supporting this. They want, I think, a standardized, battery swap optionality for, I don't know if it's going to be everything in the future, but it makes sense to do more of it. Especially because once you start thinking about things like the safety issues and the not having fires, and it's a big deal that NIO can check the batteries on these, every time that they get swapped out. Here's the other thing, and this is another update. So they continue to work together. And again, this is just a nod to me that not only has CATL seen and signed off on all of this, value, the long-term value prospects for NIO and them working together, but also with the power swap station. And this is the other thing, stronger joint promotion in both domestic and overseas markets to expand global influence and market share. That's really nice to see, because even though they are kind of doing their own thing, they've kind of been trying to find their way, I think, with how theirs is going to go. And their goal is more than 3,000 by the end of 2026. But NIO is planning on doing 1,000 just generation 5 swap stations of their own this year in 2026. And so they have a huge advantage. And I think later on, I think NIO is going to be acknowledged and recognized more for the brilliance of, this model. More on that a little later. This is the other thing, since I mentioned the 1,000 planned, power swap stations. So if you think about it in terms of CATL may or may not be partnering with them and helping with, absorb some of these costs. I don't know. I haven't seen specifics on that. But you've also got this, which appeared, and I shared it, and I think I only shared it once within the last year or two. But this was NIO basically saying, hey, do you want to partner with us? and essentially invest with us in building up a power swap station or power swap stations. And now by NIO doing this creative, essentially joint venture partnership, well, they're having someone else help absorb the cost. So they've been able to find ways to reduce expenses even as they've been building this out. And so this one piece of the business model is so interesting to me. We have no idea what the true upside is. But this is a reference again to the expansion not being a solo endeavor. In August of 2024, NIO officially launched the Recharging Partner Program, and then they talk about some of the partners. Like this is just, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. And again, NIO with a goal of over 1,000 more swap stations for this year of 2026. And again, this is a reference to the 1,000 as being the goal. I think they were working on the pilot, sort of the Gen 5 pilot, and I don't know how. I believe it's going to be able to incorporate Firefly, but I also think there's more that they're doing with the technology that we haven't seen yet. And now this one, I want to actually go back in time. And by the way, this cracks me up every time I pull this up because I've shared this like 5 times now in a video. And this thing still doesn't even have 1,000 views on it. But this was NIO back in 2023, and this was their pilot project for V2G, vehicle to grid. And they have continued to work on this and to build this up. And so basically, that might be the same article I had queued up. Oh, wait, that might be because I had some. Yes, it's because there's something I wanted to read. So here's a simple overview. Regarding the technical implementation of V2G, it essentially enables electric vehicles to supply power to the grid during peak load periods and draw power from the grid during off-peak periods, transforming the vehicles into dispatchable mobile energy storage resources. This is, here's what's crazy to me. I hear lots of people talking about being excited about AI. The energy prices here in the US are not going down. And if there's going to be all this compute power and, the grid needs to be built out more, how does that work? And what if something like this, even at a small scale, the power swap station coming into, let's say, a local regional area and giving the grid a boost, that could be huge. And I think that some countries, some regions of the world are going to recognize and take advantage of it. And I also think that's going to be very, very positive for NIO. And I don't know what the profit point or pivot point for profit is. I don't know. This is, again, a little bit of this breakdown. They're continuing to work on this stuff though. And this is as recent as late January. So this has been years, in the progress and the growth and everything just continues. But I think it's a long way from us really seeing or recognizing what it could be. Now, this is also why I think March, April is just the beginning of, or the short-term side of where things could get really interesting. And that's, William Lee is very focused on, just like he wanted them to achieve a profitable Q4, which they've done, and they haven't reported yet, but they gave us a teaser and a heads up that it's coming. And so that'll probably be announced in March. But he also wants this. Now, I read the article. If you haven't, please do check it out. I do think it's possible, and it might even be likely. More on that a little bit later, because the ES8 was kind of a tipping point and a great validation in a couple different things. And I think that was the key to the Q4 profitability. So no, this is me thinking in terms of the pivot point in the Chinese market. And so this is a video that I did, and I talked about how NIO being positioned, and its positioning was so unique as being premium and luxury. They wanted the NIO brand to target and take market share from BMW, Audi, and Mercedes. Now, those used to sell, I think, over 800,000 each a year in that huge market of China. And even in 2025, the three of them sold about 1.4, it was between 1.4 and 1.5 million gas or ICE internal combustion engine vehicles in the Chinese market. Now, there were fewer than 400,000 BEVs sold in the entire market, which means there is still a huge market share to shift over. And that is something that makes the numbers from the ES8 even more impactful and important as this pivot point from 2025, 2026, where NIO is being better recognized in the Chinese market. And the ES8 being positioned with its price point where it was. So this is a video I talked about that was so good that they ended up just dominating in that higher priced segment or sub-segmented piece of the market. But as it's pointed out here, data suggests that those three German brands still maintain a strong grip on the price segment. Now, here's what makes things a little more fun and interesting, compelling moving forward, because this is NIO at the ES8. And remember, that was a late refresh. It was late in the year in 2025. So for them to be doing so well with it, and there's still that much more of the ICE market that can shift over, pivot, or that market share can be taken by BEVs. Well, if NIO in April, again with that time frame, March, April, if they are going to announce and showcase the ES9, and I don't know when deliveries will start, but can that do as well or perhaps even better than the ES8? Yeah, I think so. Am I going to count on it? No. But if we consider that one of the driving factors, and we'll hear about it when he tells us in the earnings, probably he'll break down and talk about the margins and the price point from the ES8 and how I think, how big of a boost that gave them for the Q4 profitability. If they do anywhere near that with the ES9, I think that gives them a great setup for full year profitability in 2026. Now, again, we don't know when it's going to be, released or deliveries would start. So I don't know if they can, will they be able to ramp it as fast? I don't know. It seems like they maybe have figured some of that out. So stay tuned and, we'll keep tracking things. But again, March, April, very, very compelling time frame for me, just tracking NIO stock in the short term even. I have to explain something and apologize because I had started a take on this earlier and I had gone for, I don't know, 12, 13 minutes getting, working into the video. And it was only then that I realized the screen had gone black. I think the Restream software that I use kind of, I don't know, fritzed out on me or whatever. And so I had to kill that video and start again. And when I started again, I had to, basically go back into Restream, set everything up again. And one of the things that I did not set up was the three short-term stock price indicators at the bottom of the screen. And so I just realized that. So I put them up there and we'll come back and talk about them before the end of the video once again. But I also actually want to, now that I have the IDE growth chart in entrepreneurship, this is from Disciplined Entrepreneurship, by the way, a phenomenal read. And so I'm going to change though now the captions because these, as we're talking about why I chose NIO, I was looking for an IDE. And an IDE is basically a company, and they've got some of the things here, focuses on a global market. But I think the important takeaway and the thing that I understood was that these IDE companies have to invest heavily. And so their growth trajectory and the profitability does not go like an SME. An SME is a small medium enterprise, basically a local, regional and they can make money right away from, from the beginning, but they're going to grow, in a pretty consistent fashion versus your IDEs. These are going to be companies like NVIDIA, Tesla, Amazon, Netflix. These companies, not only at a certain point, Apple's another one. There was a short thesis or a disbelief, and let's take Netflix. Here's an example. I don't know, depending on your age, you may or may not remember a company called Blockbuster. Well, they're gone, and companies like Netflix are now they've changed the way that, I mean, this idea of streaming at some point, early on, people probably were like, oh, that's not going to work. Why would you pay for that? Now, I don't even know how many different companies have subscription services for streaming. So, this is just an example of how these IDEs are disruptive, but they have to get to profitability. And so the negative side is this heavy investment. But if you'll note, and William Lee has talked about this, he's kind of teased this, or hinted at it, is that, we could have sudden explosive growth. Basically, our profitability might really come fast. And so if we're here, let's say, what do things look like for the rest of this year, even with respect to the stock price? I think things get really fascinating, and could go fast. I'm not counting on that because, again, the whole idea of this was these take time. Global footprint. NIO is still not well known or recognized globally. Very few Americans have ever heard of NIO at this stage. So I think they've got a long way to go. Now, how fast does that shift or change if Firefly starts getting sent over to the US, this year, or if there's an announcement for a partnership or a factory and NIO is going to actually do something here in the US. That could really change things. Doesn't even have to be in the US. Could be Canada, could be Mexico. I think, and this is a change that I've had to make with my own thinking, is I think we're going to see it, and I think we'll see it sooner than probably most of us expected or realized. And so, but because I have the three, actually no, I'll do that later. I want to come back to that. The three major growth phases for me that kind of align with NIO as an IDE. But I do want to talk about this because this was really interesting, and it happened recently. This video I recorded on February 14th, and I captured things on screen that you cannot even see now. And it was NIO and CATL and some of these other Chinese companies, a lot of Chinese companies, frankly, were listed on this apparent, DOD list, or they were saying that it was that these are companies that are doing business with the Chinese military. And what happened was this list was supposedly announced, and then it was pulled. And this is what shows up now. You can't even pull it up. And I want to walk through what might have happened, and why. It's, I just have some different thoughts I want to offer on this, because I want to be open-minded and consider different things. But if you haven't, and whether you agree with my thinking on this and the possibility of a couple different things that could have been playing out, if you haven't checked out all those links about the rare earths and why China actually has the leverage over the US at this point, we are not in the driver's seat with this. And then with this meeting coming, in March/April between Trump and Xi, let's come back and look at, what am I showing on screen? I need to change to this guy. Let's actually look at when they sort of did this apparent leak. And I want to show you what I see, which is really not much, with the price action to the downside. But I want you to see it as well. All right. It was Friday the 13th. It was Friday, February 13th when they did that. And I believe this was the pre-market move. And the low point off of any of these wicks to the downside was, I think, about 470 something. So $4.70 something cents. And that was when they initially, put this out and then pulled it back. And I think two different things could have been going on. I want to walk through both scenarios and possibilities, but not before I make this point. This is when NIO teased profitability. This is the only 100 million share trade day we've had. The stock price had closed at $4.44 before that. We are still well above, and this is the 13th, where the low for the day was, it didn't even register that low, a wick that I mentioned. So during the day, the low is about $4.81. In other words, NIO is still, even with low volume and elevated ongoing spiking FTDs, it is still maintaining this move that it made. So now let's talk about two different scenarios. Maybe the release and the pullback from this DoD list, maybe this was the US trying to negotiate or set a negotiating point, or put some sort of leverage ahead of the meet scheduled for March, April between Trump and Xi. If that's the case, now I want to reinsert Citadel and just mention something. If Citadel has been shorting these companies so hard and for so long, I'm talking about the Chinese companies, that may be why there wasn't more of a negative reaction. And so Citadel, ironically, might have actually kept this from having more of a negative impact, or they may be one of the parties who, unintentionally, they're just trying to make their money, right? They don't care about anything else, I'm sure. But I just thought that was compelling to share. The other thought is this. What if the US tried to do this as a negotiating play and China said, hey, don't do that? And now it's just not showing up. That also could be a factor. If they're already doing some of the things that Luke Groman highlighted in some of the comments, or I referenced it in the comments section, so you can check that stuff out, then I would almost expect that that China and the US have been having conversations behind the scenes, and it goes way beyond what any of us are going to know about. And so I wanted to offer that. I could see either of those things possibly being in play. And as to why we're not seeing it, the actual list released. But again, if you want to actually see the contents of the list, you got to go to that video that I shared from February 14th. And this is the other thing about Citadel. They get fined periodically over the years for doing things wrong, not just in the US, but this was a huge settlement. Almost $100 million that they got hit by the Chinese regulators, and they were not allowed to trade over there for years. So how ironic would it be if, coming full circle, they've been profiting off of targeting companies like NIO and Alibaba, shorting them, and if they accidentally, their negative pressure on the stock prices kept them from falling more, if that was the intent of the US. I just think it's all very fascinating to think about. But I want to shift one more time here, and let's talk about the keys for NIO's dominance in tech and in the future. I've said it a few times, and I don't think people are really understanding yet, but the future dominance that NIO might have in the autonomous space. This shows the number of patents filed and obtained by NIO. They developed their own in-house chip. So just based on the level of technology being so advanced, all the AI and things that they are already doing, and so much that they're even doing in-house, I could see why they would be viewed as a threat. And I actually think it was really smart that William Li didn't talk a lot about the in-house chip that they developed, because of geopolitical reasons. And I'm super curious about who they've worked with on it. I have some theories, but I don't have an answer on it. But there's no question that their technology is incredible. And so that's part of it. And the patents, I think, speak to that. And I think it further is supported by CATL doing so much with them. But here's the other thing, is they brought someone in. He was a co-founder of Momenta, and his name is Ren Shaoquing. And this guy's a genius in his own right. Um, Although he seems very humble and just kind of like William Lee, just kind of a down to earth guy. But this is something that I discovered and shared, and I don't think many people have seen this or understand this. The possible significance of this is you've got the shareholders, and I think of NIO in terms of being a holding company with all these businesses and entities that, in their own rights, could make a lot of money. So, kind of with that lens or that view, they mention in here, and this is the page 52 of the 746 from the most recent annual filing. And this is a new thing. At least I hadn't seen it before, but they brought in Ren Shaoquing to head up their autonomous driving stuff and to do some other things as well. And this shows that you've got the two co-founders with equity interests in NIO NIO AT. And then you've got Ren Shaoquing, who is a vice president of the company, owning 17.76% of the equity interests in NIO NIO AT. Now, we're talking about two co-founders of NIO, and now he gets that interest. I think this is a direct nod to the value that he brings to the tech and to the autonomous space. By the way, there aren't a lot of these out there that you can find, but this is one where, and once again, I've made it easy for you. I'll link this, and here's your timestamp where you can see Ren and some of the things that NIO is working on. And this is over a year ago. So again, a nod to NIO with its continued development and growth and the technology, being a leader and just not even recognized for it yet. So it's all very exciting for me and in my mind. And now, kind of final thoughts, I guess, if we come back, actually, no, I want to pull this up instead. If we come back and do sort of, I'm going to close with the thought and kind of looking at where NIO is with respect to my first three major growth phases. This represents the shortest side of my long-term time frame. And because once I realized I couldn't really put it in years, I wanted to have, see certain things. And so, for example, market awareness is NIO being known and recognized, not just in China, but globally, but most importantly in China. And I still think they have a ways to go because actually there is another video I'll have to do, and I'm just going to give you a teaser. I'll call it the rural market. And I think that is a market that is ripe for NIO to go in and just dominate. And I don't know how much it will help them, cut into that that market share of the premium and luxury, because I don't know how much of it is going to Mercedes, BMW, and Audi on the gas side or ICE side. But I know they have the infrastructure with the power swap stations that they just need to get out and get the market awareness to the people. And if they can't afford NIO, I think it's also important for us to recognize that Onvo and Firefly are both of these sub-brands are both new. So I don't know how many in China have even heard of, one or both of them. And I don't know how many know that they're all part of the NIO DNA yet. But NIO, with the ES8 and the ES9 that's upcoming, I think we're going to see them take more of a dominant position, certainly in the BEV, 400,000 RMB price range and above. But I think also that's going to be part of that important pivot point for where that, that market penetration can, a lot more of that market share is there to be taken. And I think that NIO, having taken the time and made the focus to establish themselves as premium and luxury, and being a homegrown brand, probably the first of their kind like that can be globally known and acknowledged, those are exactly the kinds of things that, that align with my idea of seeing them as an IDE and what I hoped they could become. Now, what I didn't know back then was that Onvo and Firefly were going to be a thing. So again, coming back to the reality that those are new, I think we are still in an early to mid stage of the market awareness in China. And I think we're still at a very early stage globally. But I also think Firefly is kind of the key with that price point and it's going to stand out. It's going to capture eyes and attention. And let's face it, their technology, everything they do is high end. Nothing NIO does is cheap. So I think that will further validate them. And it's also why Firefly can be very successful. And then when people realize, let's say in another region or market or country, they haven't seen Onvo or NIO, and then they see those, I think they'll be sold. So, it's an interesting time, I think, to be tracking this. But the market awareness and now to point out what I've got on screen, this is a move that none of those other IDE companies had at such an early stage before profitability, which is my second major growth phase. And by the way, we're getting a teaser of that, right? Upcoming probably in March, Q4 profitability. And if NIO can deliver, and I think they can, I'm going to say at this point, it's still too early to call any more than this, but I'm going to give them 50-50 chance on profitability for the year of 2026. I want to track things more. We're still, this is the slow time for sales in China right now with Chinese New Year going on. So I don't want to get ahead of myself, but I think there's at least a 50-50 chance that full year profitability is attainable and will be seen by NIO. If that's the case, then that puts them probably reporting that in March of 2027. So that would be, for me, the profitability point. And then we've got battery as a service. Now, my view with this came before I knew about NIO coming out with sub-brands. So I was thinking 1 million NIO sales. And so we haven't seen that yet. I think we'll probably see it in about 2027. So that's kind of feeling like and looking like the time frame that would be the short side of my long-term time frame that frankly gives the stock more time to move. And as I said, those other IDEs, Tesla, Apple, NVDA, Netflix, Amazon, none of them had a move like this at such an early stage. Now, I don't know that NIO is going to make a move like that again, but if it does end up getting above the all-time high, which I frankly expect, I just don't know when that will happen, or if it will happen suddenly, or if it will be, a slower growth and move up with the stock price. But once it gets above, how has everything to that point looked? And are we going to see, a completely different fourth window, something like this, or that's maybe more drawn out like that, with maybe a healthier, quote unquote, healthier move up to new all-time highs, and then the other thing is, I think they'll be listed probably in Shanghai. Is it? Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. I think Shanghai, I think you need to be profitable to be listed there. NIO is already, I believe, the only company that's listed in the three markets, Singapore, Hong Kong, and the US. How interesting could it be if they end up in a fourth? And also, as the brands are still becoming, that market awareness, the profitability, everything is still coming along. The company is still, let's not forget, it's only, 12 years old, 11, 12 years old. It's essentially still a startup. So there's a lot of runway, I think, for this over the long haul. But what does the long haul, long term look like? And that's, going to be differentiated by each investor, to each, your own. It's your money. You decide what you want to do with it and how long you want to be involved or what you want to do. But for me, that's, those three short term, or excuse me, those three major growth phases represent the short side of the long term. And so that's what I've been thinking. And I wanted to offer it here since I'm doing this long form video and content. And I'm just curious. I'm curious to hear from others on this. And I haven't even looked at the time. I don't know how long this is going or has gone. Okay, it's a pretty lengthy video. Well, I hope that I can get this thing prepared and uploaded and listed and made public on YouTube for Sunday, February 22nd, 2026. God bless you and all your loved ones. Have a great day or night whenever you see this. I'll be back with more content before you know it.